Okay, so those of you who drive in car with me will already know that I had a little bit of surgery, and so last week the only thing I was driving was an armchair. So there's Grandad in the old folks' home. But because I was quite immobile, I spent a lot of time in front of the TV, and a national news story grabbed my attention. 4 lads had gone off for a camping trip to Wales and had gone missing, which was obviously a bit unusual. Their phones had gone off and couldn't be contacted. Now, given that a lot of people who drive with me will be doing their Duke of Edinburgh expeditions or just enjoy camping and outdoor activities. For example, there's a lad that lives just around the corner from me here, three doors around the corner from where I'm sitting now. He was back from uni over the summer and did some driving with me. Each week he'd get in the car. I said, "What have you been up to since last week?" He said, "Oh, been over to Wales, been camping and walking with my mates, having a great time." And we joked about this, and I actually got a bit fed up that the young student types were having all the fun. And so on my days off, I went on a bit of a Peter Pan nostalgia trip over the summer. If you scroll through my social media, you'll see I revisited a lot of the places that I used to camp when I was 17, 18. Hooked up with some of the guys who were 17 and 18 when I was. But when I go camping these days, it involves a 3-ton van with a bed and kitchen sink, not the Force 10 tents and the Trangias of our more youthful days. But so this story of the guys in Wales going missing really sort of resonated with me, as it did many other people across the nation. And we waited in hope that there would be a happy outcome. Unfortunately, as you may be aware, it was discovered that the lad's car had left the road and was found submerged in water. At that point, what I recognised, that whilst we shared an awful lot in terms of our interests and the things we like doing, one thing separated myself from those young lads. And that was when my car left the road at 17, 18, span and rolled. I was lucky. I landed in a soft, dry place and walked away to tell the tale. And that highlights the fragility of life in cars. Okay, so everything else I'm going to say in this video, I just want to make it very clear, in no way relates or implies to anything relating to the case of the 4 lads in Wales. It's really important we're clear on that point, and their family and friends have requested privacy, and I don't think any of us could imagine what they're having to deal with now. So what we're looking to do here is harness the awareness for the fragility of life that this case brings, and see if we can take some positive learnings from it. But just for my young driver audience, just to understand what will happen next, there will naturally be an inquiry into what happened, which will be conducted in a coroner's court. And the 3 areas of focus will be on the driver of the vehicle and the other occupants, so the driver and their passengers, the dynamic of what was going on inside the car itself, the condition of the car and its maintenance, so all the things you learn for your L tests, so tyre tread depths, pressures, and all the other maintenance checks we do, the F.L.O.W.E.R checks, so the condition of the car and if that had any contributing factors, and also the prevailing road and weather conditions. So as the news reports have told us, that area of Wales, the roads are quite challenging even for experienced drivers, and the weather conditions were not good. So those are the things that now it's a matter for, not for anyone to speculate, but for that is what will be investigated. It won't change anything, it can't bring people back, but what we try to do is take learnings from these situations to avoid other families and friends going through what those families are going through. So when I was a young driver, I remember vividly tuning in to an episode of Top Gear that had been advertised, and Tiff Needell was going to drive the new Porsche 911 Turbo in peppermint pink. So I duly tuned in And before that segment of the show came on, there was a report on a guy whose name I forget, but he was doing a tour of sixth form colleges and schools. And he was a bit of a daredevil character. He was a motorcyclist, and so he would do wheelies and stoppies and jump over things and all sorts of really incredible stunts in an off-road situation. So it's quite an interesting character. But he delivered then what was quite a hard-hitting, I guess, road safety message, and had quite a direct approach and quite a nasal voice. And he kept coming back to this 15 to 24, 15 to 24. And at the time, I was young, and all I wanted to get on with was the segment on Tiffany Dell driving a Porsche 911 Turbo. But this 15 to 24 stuck in my head. And what he's actually talking about is the statistic, which unfortunately hasn't changed since those times. It's the risk area of age 15 to 24. Now clearly we can legally start driving at 17. But we tend to, once we start driving, we passenger with younger friends. So 15 to 24 is the danger zone for young drivers. And so everything we do in driver training and the driver testing and assessment criteria is aimed to minimize that risk. And in the current world we're living in, we all live in our current time. I'm nostalgically talking back to when I was 17. We've got to live in the moment of when you're 17 or 18. We've lived through COVID, which has given us lockdowns that consequently have caused backlogs in test delays. We're in a cost of living crisis where money is tight for all of us. And so expenditure on things like driver training are one of the things we have to think long and hard about. But it's important that we don't become victims of current circumstance, and we navigate our way through current times in a way that keeps us safe. The key thing I've learned about driving, as I've developed over many years, is that you don't know what you don't know. And so if we relate that back to the Top Gear episode, so Tiffany Dell driving a Porsche 911 Turbo. Now, if you'd asked me at that age, I would have genuinely believed that I could jump straight out of my driving instructor Marion's Nissan Micra and jump straight into that Porsche 911 Turbo. And I don't think I was delusional in any way. It was just pure naivety on my part. And as it happens, a good friend of mine now owns one of those Porsche 911s that was featured way back then, so it's now a classic 911. And with the benefit of a lot of driver training and experience, whilst I'm sure he would very generously loan me that car, I would think very long and hard about attempting to drive it. But what the point I'm highlighting there is that I genuinely didn't know what I didn't know. And this is where taking a bit of guidance from your driving instructor and the driving examiners is really important, because we all have, hopefully we're all a bit over optimistic and have a tendency to think we are better than perhaps we are in certain phases of our driver development. And so it is important to take guidance from people who will give you a step back perspective. Now, the challenge we often have in a driver coaching relationship is that obviously you pay money to a driving instructor. And so there's always is that element of, well, is the driving instructor just leading me on, telling me I need more lessons to extract cash from me? So if I can just take that point head on, most genuine driving instructors wouldn't even ever do that. Though it's a broad church. There are a lot of driving instructors, so you need to be cautious as with any financial transaction. But what I would highlight at the moment, given the COVID backlogs, there is no shortage of work for driving instructors, so they are highly unlikely to be stringing you along. So don't dismiss good advice by mistaking it for being ripped off. And similarly, it's important to understand the limitations of the driving test. And this is a crucial point, because often your driving instructor will say to you, I don't think you are test ready. And so as a DVSA driving instructor, I should not present a pupil to an examiner and say to them, I believe this pupil is test ready. Can you validate that? So if I don't believe a pupil is test ready, I will not present them in my car, as DVSA have asked. But nonetheless, a pupil can't be held to ransom by a driving instructor. It's not for me to decide whether or not they are test ready. That's the job of the examiner. So they are at liberty to present themselves in their own car. So if mum or dad wants to take them down, put some L plates on, that's entirely their decision. It's an adult decision. And there is in no way, my opinion on that driver will have any bearing on whether or not they pass or fail on that day. But what you have to understand is a driving test lasts maybe 38, 40 minutes, 30 minutes minimum wheels turning. So if nothing untoward happens during those 30 or 40 minutes, the examiner must award you a pass. And so whilst we are get very het up about, what can the examiner fail you for? Well, it's a very strict criteria that they are legally obliged to. If the error doesn't occur or the omission doesn't occur, they cannot fail you. And so this is the thing. The test is a very limited set of circumstances, will be highly dependent, as always in driving, on the scenarios that you encounter on that day. So your driving instructor will have seen you over many hours at a time and has that benefit. And so that if they see a recurring gap in your skill set, that is what they will be advising you of. If that doesn't occur during those 30 minutes, 40 minutes of a driving test, the examiner will not see it, the examiner will not record it, and you will be awarded your driving license. And there are many tragic cases which highlight that whilst we need a system, no system is perfect, and things do happen. So just be aware of that and the relationship you have with your driving instructor. If any driving instructor relationship isn't working and you genuinely feel that you are being financially taken for a ride, well, take yourself elsewhere, get another piece of advice, but don't just dismiss it on the basis of it being a money-grabbing driving instructor, because it probably isn't. Generally, driving instructors will have your safety and public safety as their top priority. The other key thing to recognise is that an L-test pass is the minimum legal standard that you must achieve to drive independently on the road. It does not imply you know everything there is to know about driving. You can't possibly know or have experienced that. And as the DVSA would acknowledge and encourage, you need subsequent driver training. So things such as the Pass Plus scheme, or the charitable organisations, the road safety and driving standards agencies of IAM Road Smart or ROSPA. These are groups, local groups, who are run by volunteers, highly skilled, highly trained, advanced driver volunteers who will happily share their knowledge and experience with you. And so, talking about the cost element, this is something you do in your own car. And these people are volunteers, so they're not making a living from selling their expertise and turning up in a fully insured, fueled car. You turn up in your own car, they give you the benefit of their knowledge and feedback. So these are very cost-effective ways of progressing the base level of skills you've developed for L-test. So that is certainly something I would advise any young driver to explore and to keep learning.